I am not raising my hand. Hey, welcome to Two Seals and a Walrus, the only podcast that has two United States Navy SEALs as co-hosts. I am your co-host, Sean Webb, doing the intro because we always forget to do our intros. Today, we're going to have guest Rollin McCraty talk about the science of the intelligence of your heart and all of the neurons and all of the connecting tissue between your heart and your brain. And you might be pleasantly surprised at how much you didn't know about that. And I'll also tell you the story about this. If you're looking at me on video, you can tell I'm in a cast slash sling slash whatever it is, thanks to an injury that I took with the boys. Don't go away.
Two seals and a walrus.
Hey guys, welcome to the show. So let me tell you the story about how I injured my arm and wound up in a sling and splint. The boys and I were fishing at a remote cabin out in the middle of the woods near a lake, and we had to port the boat from the SUV that Ben drove and bring it down through the woods to the lake. And so I'm carrying it. I step in a hole and pop! My right bicep tendon popped and dislocated my bicep, separated my bicep all the way up near my shoulder, and had to go have surgery to put it back, because I don't know if you guys know, those types of things don't just heal without surgical intervention. But everything went well. Hopefully I'll be able to get this thing off semi-soon and let the healing commence without having to have it folded up next to my body. Okay, so on to today's episode, we have the guest Rollin McCraty, who is the lead researcher for HeartMath.org. You can check that stuff out, but basically he's been studying the science of the intelligence around the heart and all of our internal organs and how they communicate with each other, and where a lot of our internal feelings and thoughts and messages come from, because he says that a lot of the information to the brain is sent from the heart. And so he's a member of HeartMath.org, and he's the lead researcher and has a lot of awesome science to talk to us about today. The boys pop in with a bunch of questions and comments. Enjoy the episode. Talk to you at the end. On the line, we have with us today Dr. Rollin McCraty, who is a representative of a movement or a science, kind of a company that's providing technology to help people understand the intelligence within their bodies so that they can have a higher level of well-being, etc. So we'd like to invite onto the show and introduce Rollin McCraty. How are you today, sir?
I'm doing great. Thanks for the invitation.
No problem. So tell us a little bit about, what is HeartMath? What is this stuff that you've been working on for the last number of decades that you've got funding and you've seen amazing outcomes scientifically for, et cetera? Just share with us today what's going on with that stuff.
Okay, well, that's hard to do in a couple of sound bites. But basically, I'm director of research for the HeartMath Research Institute. And I guess our primary focus is developing tools, techniques, and technologies that are really based on a deep understanding of the physiology, but people that help people better self-regulate, and especially their emotional responses. That's where most people lose a lot of their energy and really block their ability to elevate their consciousness. So there are HeartMath centers really all around the world now. I'm actually honored to say I know we have a couple of SEALs with us, ex-SEALs. We developed you might have heard of some of our work, the resilience program for the pre-deployment program for all the people deploying on detainee operations. So I personally trained about 5,000 Navy men and women over about a 5-year period that were deployed on that mission. One other way of saying it is I could say in military, law enforcement, first responder context, which we do a lot of work in, it's really about tools and techniques that allow people to better maintain their composure in the heat of the moment. I would say it a different way, but we probably have people that wouldn't appreciate my language.
What the fuck are you talking about?
Yeah, so specifically, you've been working on the science connected with the neurons around the heart and the intelligence that you can gain from that, which is kind of, I guess, maybe why you guys named it HeartMath. Is that correct?
Well, it's part of it. I mean, Yes, and it also I could answer this 2 or 3 ways, but heart is usually seen as this mushy Valentine's Day kind of soppy thing, and that's not what our perspective on the heart is. It's really about business and about really helping bring the system into alignment, and ultimately about raising consciousness and about really self-regulation. And that's the problem is oftentimes an out of control mind, and it needs a higher level of intelligence, if you will, to finally bring that sucker into alignment and balance,
Right.
To regulate our mind and emotions. So HeartMath is not about follow your emotions or like that. It's about how we regulate them and bring them into alignment with a deeper intelligence within ourselves.
Right.
Can I ask a question that might be a wrench in the gears?
Sure.
Why the heart, not the gut? There's more neurons in the gut than the heart. Second to the brain.
Well, that is true. I'll give you a couple of answers.
And I'm asking because I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not a.
So the heart. Let me give you a little story here.
Okay, cool.
So, if we go back to the, say, late 1960s, early 1970s, it was discovered that the activity of the heart, I'll call it the quality of the neural signals for right now, had profound influences on brain function and actually modulated perception. And a couple of terms were introduced back at that time in the early 70s called cortical inhibition and cortical facilitation to describe the effects the activity the heart had on the brain. And it was the first scientific hypothesis at that time that suggested that the heart had a causal role in modulating perception and consciousness. And that, you can imagine, drew a lot of heat, at that time.
Yeah, especially then.
Yeah.
They were actually, those researchers, they were called the Lacey's, a husband and wife team, were proven over their research career, way proven to be right, and won all kinds of career award achievements and all kinds of things. So dial around a little bit later, a new field emerged called neural cardiology, because at that time they were looking into the mechanisms, but they didn't really understand all of it. They were actually talking about, if you read through the older literature, like the heart had a mind of its own. And at that time, it was believed that the autonomic nervous system was this sort of stupid thing that the brain controlled, and that the body just jumped to its tune, right? But anyway, they noticed that the heart didn't do that. You might have a sympathetic increase, the heart rate's supposed to go up, but the heart rate refused to go down, and vice versa. Anyway, this wasn't following the paradigm. Anyway, neurocardiology then came on the scene, and that's basically, as you might imagine, cardiologists and neurologists getting together, and that's about a 30-year-old field now, maybe a little bit more, who have really quite elegantly shown that within the human heart is what we now call the heart brain, and that's a nickname for it was technically called the intrinsic cardiac nervous system. And neurocardiology is a huge field. There are conferences on it, textbooks, hundreds of publications now. I'm going to dial back even a little bit later now in time. So what I'm about to say is that the heart sends far more information to the brain than the brain sends to the heart. And that may sound like some big new discovery. No, been known since the late 1800s. It's basic anatomy. But what wasn't known was the complexity of the neural structures in the heart. And so I will get around to answering your question.
I know.
So
Take your time.
At the parasympathetic system, or the primary nerve of the parasympathetic, the vagus nerves, 2 of them, one on each side of the body, come up through the front of the body. 90%, most estimate that 90% of those neural fibers, and there's thousands of nerves in each vagus, by the way. They're very big nerves. That 90% are carrying information from the body to the brain. Only 10% are going down. We can do a more conservative estimate of 80%. Anyway, 80 to 90%. And the vast majority of those neural fibers are coming from the heart and cardiovascular system.
Not the gut?
Not the gut. Gut, on the other hand, is more what we call an effector organ. It's more affected by the descending signals and has very few afferent. The complexity of the afferent, meaning going to ascending signals in this context.
Right.
So the heart is sending just gazillions of information in a rhythmic, complex fashion. So we know there are chemoreceptive neurons, mechanoreceptive neurons in the heart that all get processed in the intrinsic cardiac nervous system. and integrate the information coming down from the brain and actually can and do override those neural signals. So the gut's not like that. It's more of just an effector organ. Now, of course, there are afferents or ascending from the gut, but that's more saying, oh, I'm full, or the gag response. So the amount of afferent or ascending information coming from the heart and gut are radically different. The heart far outweighs it, where it's more of the efferent or the descending, so we tend to feel it in the gut.
Sorry if this is a tangent, but I have to ask because this is an opportunity to ask. Why are there more neural connections in the gut then?
More to control.
No, well, you don't need those type of connections to function.
But when you're running an entire immune system,
you're right. Though there are a lot of neural ganglia.
Yep.
Neural plexus is in the gut. Is more involved at the local control of peristaltic action of the gut and these types of things, and serotonin being the major neurotransmitter of the enteric nervous system, we can call it that, the gut neural system, where oxytocin is the main neurotransmitter of the intrinsic cardiac nervous system. So it's more involved in local gut control. It just doesn't have the same kind of neural connection back to the brain.
The highway's different.
Yeah. All right. So for our layman people in our audience who are like, whoa, you guys just accelerated away from me. Let me try to sum this up a little bit in that there's a lot of information in the vagus nerves that travels from the body up to the brain so that the brain then can make these supposed executive decisions, presumptively, about what needs to be done within the body to help maintain homeostasis or a healthy operating environment. But that there's a lot of decision making that goes on down in those depths of both the gut and the heart that then gets sent up to the brain. A ton of information that is intelligent. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah. So let me tell you another story of some of our research you may not be familiar with.
Okay.
And it actually is related to the topic of consciousness expansion. I'm going to dial back a little bit now to the 90s. And we did a track of research that I ended up calling the Electrophysiology of Intuition at that time. So we were hearing so much from people who were starting to use the HeartMath techniques in their lives that one of the dramatic things that they were noticing, and I'm not just talking about one or two people, this is masses of people.
Right.
And that their intuitions are like on steroids. And then the second thing they would say is synchronicities are just like way off the charts, different than they used to be. So that got me interested in the topic that I later called intuition. And so there was a friend of mine, a guy named Dean Radin, who was doing some work that he called presentiment and so on at that time. And it had come up with a protocol to show that the body could respond before a future stimulus. And I won't go into this is very well thought out research. I'm not going to go into all the digititis of it, but basically that if you're wired up person up and you're making their physiology, and then you have them sitting at a computer screen, and then you show a picture, either a really negative one, like about as edgy as you can get them, snakes striking and bad guys with knives at women's throats.
Yeah.
Yeah. You got the picture. Then on the other end of the spectrum, you got bunny rabbits and flower pots and nature scenes and stuff like that. Was
this the reverse priming experiments?
No, there's nothing to do with priming.
Okay.
This is more pre-stimulus. It was what we now call it, intuition.
Okay.
So there's no priming. So we're looking at electrophysiology prior to you see the picture.
Okay, right. Right.
And what Dr. Radin had found was that he was using skin conductance as his primary measure, and that if you will see a significantly different skin conductance response in the period before you see the picture. And the picture is randomly selected, by the way, by the computer. Nobody can possibly know what this future picture is going to be.
Yeah, after the fact.
The computer doesn't even know until the data is collected.
Right.
Okay. So thought that was pretty cool. So we originally adopted his basic protocol, but added a whole lot more measures to it. EEG, ECG, heart rate variability, skin conductance, and some DC measures, other things you don't need to know about.
Right.
And our purpose was to see if we could track and trace the flow of this intuitive information through the body, brain, body, nervous system, neural axis, see what the flow of it was.
Right.
And long story short, and we had these people, I should also mention, go through this protocol. It's a big study. 30 people, and they went through it twice. once before getting in what we call a heart rhythm coherent state for 5 minutes before they went through the protocol, and once just in their normal state. We were nice to them, come in, wire them up, now do it, right? So you might imagine hundreds of hours have gone into this kind of a study, the time you get people wired up and, do 30 people twice and do all this.
Right.
So we started looking at the skin conductance. I'm going to tell you the true story of how it actually went here. I don't often tell the whole story. And so we did our analysis, and lo and behold, we did not have a significant skin conductance difference in the pre-stimulus period.
Okay.
We had failed to replicate Dr. Radin's experiment.
Okay.
So we were not happy campers, as you might imagine.
Right.
But we forged ahead and looked at the next level, which was the heart rate variability, the beat-to-beat change in heart rate data. And huge response, pre-stimulus response. Big, I mean, huge.
Wow.
And was about 80% accurate in predicting what the future picture was going to be, actually.
See, so that is like mind blowing right there. That's like proof that at some point the nervous system is looking into the future of what is going to occur and reacting to future events that have not even been decided upon in that moment of time where the reaction is happening. The computer is going to decide what happens after that point. The body is 80% reacting accurately.
Right, that is correct. All right, so we move ahead, and I actually had a phone call with Dean, Dr. Radin, and showed him our data. And he goes, oh, by the way, I forgot to mention when I was down at your lab and we were talking that we screen out people that have a history of meditation or.
Well, there goes what I was going to say.
They don't have a skin conductance response.
Right.
And we're like, well, we screened 4 people that have that history because we wanted to have them be in a coherent state before the protocol, right? I'm kind of on the phone, that would have been good to know.
Yeah, thanks for that.
So what we then looked at a much deeper dive into the data, and I'll make a long story short here, where the first change in the body prior to the future event was the heart. The heart sent a measurably different neural signal to the brain. You then had a brain response, all pre-stimulus. You then had a body response, the gut feeling, right? So the gut gets the credit. And once the gut, which is the effector organ, or the hair on the back of the neck, where it then becomes a conscious feeling.
Ah,
right.
Bingo, there's our answer.
Yep.
I like it.
That's
So
it.
I can sit with that.
Body, then conscious feeling is the actual flow of information. So now this experiment's been replicated a number of times now, and we've developed different gambling protocols and blah, 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 blah. And it's consistently the heart that is the predictor. So we went on then to actually define intuition as 3 different types to help clarify. This is what I call non-local, what we're talking about now, but there's implicit knowledge, which is your priming and bias, like Blink and those kind of books are all based on processes. And then we have what we call energetic sensitivity, which we've also done a lot of work in, which is the body's ability to detect and respond to really real signals in the environment that our nervous system is able to detect that we're not usually consciously aware of.
Yeah.
So this includes things like empathy and you feel like somebody's staring at you. And
what are the receptors to that?
Okay, well, that is actually unknown. We really don't know yet. From my perspective, I think there's multiple levels. Probably the nervous system as a whole is my best guess there.
Like neural tubules? Excuse me. Words are hard for me.
Microtubules?
Well, that would be molecular biological.
Thank you.
Maybe not. I mean, Roger.
I like that I open with words are hard.
The way I got that published, by the way, in the late 90s, was to talk about the heart and brain, because it also had a pre-stimulus, but primarily heart, having access to a field of information outside the boundaries of time and space, right?
Right.
That's the way I put it.
Boom.
So, perfectly acceptable language, just entanglement and all this had been proven at that time, and non-locality. Supposedly that was only at subatomic scales.
Right.
Since then, I mean, here we were showing it in hot, wet, messy organs like hearts and brains, right?
Right.
Now that has been since in quantum physics. I'm sure you guys know. Take the macroscopic scale, and whole groups of atoms have now been entangled and so on.
Yeah.
So for me, I've kind of come out of the closet a little bit since then. And so what the heck is a field of information outside the boundaries of time and space anyway? Now we can say quantum field or something like that, but what the hell is that?
Right, right.
Yeah.
Right?
It's just another idea.
Right. So basically, I'm suggesting that in here at HeartMath and my colleagues that some of the data I was just sharing with you is pretty good evidence that a lot of the philosophers and really all the religions of the great religions of the world have been saying all along is the heart is literally the access point to our larger self, whatever you want to call it, soul, spirit, and we just call it our large, taking the religious connotations out of it here at HeartMath. But I'm saying that that's a real thing, a real structure in a different dimension of density, and that's what we actually mean by heart intelligence. So the real flow of intuition, the kind that takes us out of the box and that actually elevates consciousness, is aligning with that part of ourself, of our undivided wholeness, as David Bohm would put it.
Wow. So it might not be the microtubules of our brain. It might be the microtubules of our heart that is connected out into the quantum foam.
Well, yeah, I think the quantum is just a transition phase between different dimensions.
Yeah.
Between matter and energy?
Well, or information or intelligence, we could call it. Maybe more there's a pretty wild consciousness that's organizing, life, not just life, but,
I agree.
Yeah. So one of the things that was really compelling about the science that I saw that you guys put out was the difference in sine wave of the cardiac rhythm based on different states of mind or states of unconscious awareness. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, and that's somewhat related, because the other thing I was just going to wrap up that intuition work. I mean, we're being very nonlinear here. This is not normal the way I would lay this stuff out. When people were in this, what we call heart coherent state, which is what you're asking about now, before the intuition studies, guess what happened? That channel between the heart and brain was measurably, significantly increased. So the modulation of the frontal cortex from the heart was way enhanced when we were in that heart coherent state.
Yeah.
So what am I talking about anyway? And this is like in a healthy person, a resilient person, our heart rate changes with each and every heartbeat. Right? This is not the same thing as heart rate.
Wait, sorry, could you say that one more time?
Okay, in a healthy or resilient person, our heart rate changes with each and every heartbeat.
Okay, I thought that's what you said. I just wanted to emphasize it again.
Yeah, and that's called heart rate variability, okay, which is very different than heart rate, which is just simply how many times is the heartbeat in a minute.
Right.
So when you look at the beat-to-beat changes, there's two things that are important. I'll just briefly mention the first, and that's how much of it we have. So we have more of this natural beat-to-beat variability when we're young, and it gets less as we age. In fact, if you're on a healthy aging trajectory, we can tell within about 2 years how old you are just from measuring your heart rate variability. Right? In fact, we've actually shown in military populations, for example, that if you have low variability pre-deployment, you are at much greater risk of what the Navy calls stress injury.
Oh, right.
And all that kind of stuff that they don't want to name that way.
Yeah.
You guys know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
The operational stress control program, I'm sure, and all that. Right?
Yeah.
So anyway, I know a lot about the Navy. I did a lot of work with them. Anyway,
You probably know too much.
So the amount of variability we have is really a measure of health status, resilience, capacity, these types of things. Cognitive functions are all related to it. But the more important thing in what you're asking about, Sean, is not so much the amount of it we have, but what is the pattern of it.
Right.
The way to think of this variability, and this is actually true of all biological systems, by the way, is we encode information in the intervals between things. Like, for example, the way a neuron sends information from one neuron to another is we have these spikes, right? Neural spikes.
Yep.
Well, all the information is contained in the intervals between the spikes. The amplitude has nothing to do with it. It's all the intervals. Hormonal system does the same thing. Of course, there's information in the amount of a hormone, but all hormones are released in pulses. And if you change the pulse time between the hormonal pulses, you have different specific biological different changes. So the heart's doing the same thing. It's just now a signal that goes globally through our whole body. You can measure the electrocardiogram anywhere in the body. You put an electrode on your nose, your little toe, it doesn't matter. So it's a synchronizing signal. And the patterns in the rhythmic activity actually reflect emotional state. So when somebody's feeling upset, like pissed off, angry, anxious, overwhelmed, you see the heart rhythm as a very chaotic looking rhythm. Versus when they're feeling something like composed, right, centered, appreciative, kind, the heart rhythm shifts into a completely different mode. It's what we call a coherent heart rhythm. That's the sine wave-like pattern.
Right.
I'm going to circle back around now. Let me just finish this.
Yeah, of course.
First thing I said, remember the terms cortical inhibition and cortical facilitation?
Right.
Well, it took a bunch of years to sort that out, not just our lab, but labs all around the world. And we now know the mechanisms. So when you're in that incoherent or chaotic heart rhythm, there's a direct neural pathway from the afferents from the heart, the ascending pathway to the medulla, and then directly to the thalamus. Thalamus is the very core of our brain, has many roles and functions. We only have one of those guys, right? And one of those functions is that it literally synchronizes the neural activity of the entire brain. So it's a global synchronizing function. So when it's being hit with these incoherent heart rhythms, it basically inhibits and interferes with cortical synchronization. Hence the term cortical inhibition, right? Whereas when we're in a coherent state, it has the opposite, and it enhances and facilitates global cortical synchronization. And there's where the term cortical facilitation came from, to describe the effect before the mechanisms were understood. And one of the primary, this is true of our reaction times, coordination. It's easy to do things like coordination, reaction time tasks to see this effect. But the part of the brain that's affected most is the frontal cortex.
Right.
Right. And by the way, one of my mentors, Carl Pribram's, the guy who coined the term executive functions to describe that part of the brain.
Nice.
What that gives us, really, according to Dr. Pribram, is foresight. That's what the frontal cortex gives us, the ability to understand how our actions and behaviors in the present affect the future. Right? So goals, setting goals, planning, abstract thinking, all frontal cortex activities. So it's really pretty simple at the end of the day. The neural machinery or structures that underlie those functions and abilities have to be highly synchronized to perform optimally. Right? You get the brain out of sync. Guess what gets taken offline first?
Right.
So I can say this two ways. It's why an otherwise very intelligent individual can make a bad choice when they're emotionally upset. Or I can say it like it is. It's why anger makes us stupid, right?
Right. Right. And that's one of the things that I tried to write about and tell people about in the Mind Hacking Happiness books. I was like, look, you need to understand, book plug. You need to understand your emotional processing, because it can literally take your thinking brain out of the loop. And 150 years ago, that was great when we were challenged with,
saber-tooth tigers.
A snake or something coming out of the woods, and then all we need is the energy to run. Shut down our thinking brain, of course. But now that we have spreadsheets and we sit in office cubicles and things like that, and need to think our way out of problems, that doesn't really work for our present mode of thinking and doing and living, right? So
we're data monsters.
Yeah.
But in the Nikola Tesla sense of the word, when things vibrate, you can understand everything. And not to be all frou-frou about it, but what I hear is, when things actually synchronize in their actual ability to vibrate.
Yes, when they have a coherence is one of the words that I'm sure you love, Rollin, because a lot of your products and things and services and things that you're working on now have to do with coherence of the body firing in synchronicity, right?
Right. Yeah. Well, we actually we certainly didn't invent the term coherence, but we were the first to introduce what we call psychophysiological and physiological coherence into the scientific literature.
Right.
In other words, using coherence as a measure of the harmonious interconnections and activity of the body's internal rhythmic activity, hearts, brains, nervous system, hormonal system.
Can I interject real quick? Because I think this is really important. Whatever it is you're selling, the three of us, we don't get shit for. We actually just align in our beliefs and concepts of why we think things work with efficacy.
Yeah. Yeah, so there's no
for individuals.
Right. Yeah, so
I just want to be really clear on that.
Yeah, we've got nothing in. Yeah, we
have no horse in this race.
Yeah, no horse in this race. That said, I'll say that I did buy one of your devices that hangs, clips on your ear and hangs down in front of your heart to measure, I guess, vagal activity. Is that what you're measuring there?
It measures heart rate variability.
Okay, so heart rate variability, and I was able to actually get a response from my phone. Like you can see it on your phone.
Yes.
And
I just want to be clear on that.
Yeah.
This is not a promo.
Yeah, not a promo.
We just understand it to the extent we do and appreciate it.
Yeah, and it was amazing to see the real time, my physiological, I could feel it. You're directed to, open your heart and open your compassion, which, I've been pretty practiced at doing over the last, few decades. So, I've kind of got a little cheat on that. But at the point that I opened up compassion to absolutely every living thing in existence in the universe, the thing lit up like a Christmas tree, and you could see the inner glow of the graphic that they put together just go solid white, and then this ring, which is supposedly representative of the people who are also on it at the same time, like a coherence exercise, it just got so solid pink, and it was really cool to see that actually happen. That there was a physiological, a connection with my physiology that I was able to witness on my phone as a feedback, and that it was, this device was actually measuring it and helping me increase it as not necessarily a neural feedback, but a physiological feedback device. Is that why you guys designed this device that way?
Well, yeah. So the device you're talking about, Sean, is our latest device software. And by the way, I'm with a nonprofit called HeartMath Institute.
Okay.
We're a nonprofit research institute. So we don't make the devices. I have to buy them just like anybody else does.
Yeah, we don't get this stuff.
If I'm trying to sell anybody on anything, it's to listen to the voice of their heart and expand their consciousness.
Amen.
Which is exactly why you came on and want to talk to us, because we're aligned in that capacity 100%.
So absolutely, within a team context, and the app that Sean's talking about is designed to literally help people get in sync. And I mean that physiologically. And there's more and more data. It's what our research has been focused on the last couple of years now. As we train and practice getting in sync, and the SEALs, you guys know this already, behaviorally, you've got to be in sync as a team. Your life can depend on it in your guys' case. But even in sports or a business decision, what we're finding is that the heart-to-heart synchronization is real, that the rhythms of people can synchronize, and that's directly reflected on two things: our ability to maintain our own personal coherence and the emotional connections, or lack of, therefore, between the individuals in the group or the team. So you can be kind of like, you probably know what I mean.
It makes so much sense. It's painful.
like you can say, I'll work with you, but I don't really like you. I ain't going to hang out with you.
Yeah.
That synchronization ain't going to happen.
Yeah, it's bullshit.
Right?
Yeah.
So in fact, the SEALs still buy a lot of our devices. I just wondered if you guys ever got exposed to them back when you were in the service.
We definitely were exposed to some mental resilience practices and training and guidance to a very, 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 very watered down, diluted degree. And we were attached to monitors or whatever for all kinds of purposes, heart rate monitors, this, that, and the other. I was never informed specifically about any kind of HeartMath program, but they also almost actively abstained from telling us what they were doing most of the time whenever they're gathering data or anything. It's just kind of...
And I think part of that was intentional. I think part of it was just intentional.
Of course, yeah. So it's difficult to say whether or not we were part of some research project that existed.
Aren't we all?
Think the SEALs aren't buying our devices for research. They continuously buy them, so I didn't know if they were forever or not.
Yeah, they do a lot of things without telling us too. We're like the screwdriver that's part of the building the house project. They don't really know it's building a house. It's just go to work every day and fucking fit in that hole until somebody throws it out because they bought a drill.
Right. Yeah. Turn the screw until you're replaced by another tool.
Yeah, exactly. They have a really good system for the way they treat people and look out after them for their long-term health.
Yeah.
No.
So what are the other applications that you can use with that type of device as an individual, right? You mentioned the group aspect. Is there an individual functionality that you can?
Well, absolutely. Even with the group devices, you mentioned, Sean, the centerpiece reflects your own personal coherence, and the outer rings reflect the group's level of coherence.
Sure.
Or the inner balance, which is more geared towards individual training. So all these devices really exist to help people to reflect what's going on in the body, and they exist to facilitate people learning the skills to better self-regulate.
Okay.
And without the skills, who cares about the device?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, it really does. You can say it jokingly, but I mean, people. Feedback, like neural feedback, is an amazing tool for a lot of people. Like, I know Meng Tan, and he invested in this meditation device that you put on your forehead.
Muse.
Yeah, the Muse headband, right? Because you have one of those as well, right? The Muse headband that you meditate with. And that neural feedback is amazing in that it can allow you to understand when you're starting to lose focus and bring your attention to the fact that you're losing focus, and then bring your meta-awareness online to be able to take your focus and put it back where you want it to be. And that's an amazing tool. Otherwise, you could be off and running on your tangent for 20 minutes through your meditation, and you've wasted the time that you've set aside for meditation on basically, worrying about, the latest gossip at work or whatever the situation is. I think neurofeedback is an amazing tool to use. And so you're offering that in a device that can measure your vagal activity and your heart variability, right?
Yeah, your heart rhythms, and only part of heart rhythms is vaguely mediated, by the way, because heart rate variability seems really simple. Yeah, and it actually is. It's the beat-to-beat measurement of heart rate. You can spend the entire career trying to understand it.
Right.
Because being in that heart rhythm coherent state is actually measuring the degree of synchronization within our not only our nervous system, but in our higher brain structures as well. That's all been kind of proven. So it's just not this simple little sine wavy rhythm. Yes, it is, but that's reflecting so much deeper information about what's going on to get into that state.
May I play devil's advocate here?
Sure.
Generally speaking, when I try to explain things to people that maybe a concept I understand, or let's just go with that. When I try to explain a concept I understand deeply, I always go to the extremes, because that puts parameters for the human mind, I think, to understand what I'm trying to convey. So I totally get what we're saying, but let's just take a page out of 1986 here. What if companies could monitor this and say, you know what, you're out of sync, we're not hiring you? Is that I admit the fact that this is out there, but you know what? Why not? Why not discuss it?
It's in some ways, I think looking at in sync, out of sync is very state specific, and the coherence training is something you do to practice. And the way we teach it is to get coherent before your next activity, because there's a carryover. Because you're not necessarily going to be coherent when you're like right now I'm talking and kind of animated, and so I wouldn't be coherent. But when we train our what we call baseline, so then it becomes a new familiar state. It's easy to shift into it when the shit's hitting the fan, right? In life. Now, the other aspect of heart rate variability, the how much of it you have questioned, is something that's starting to be used more and more now by insurance companies, for example.
Wow.
We have lower variability than we should for our age. That is a strong risk factor for future health problems.
People like me are like, fuck yeah. Fuck yeah. Sign me up. Tie me up. I'll do this all day. Yeah. Drop my rates. But I'm not the populace. I get that, right? I get that I wasn't born normal. So okay, so you know what? So what? Are you, and I'm kind of alley-ooping here. Are you saying people could actually improve this ability?
Absolutely. That's what we do. We train people how to shift into coherence at will so they can flow through life. I mean, we got data on thousands and thousands of people now, companies, hospitals, military as well. And what we see is that with coherence practice, which again, I'm going to emphasize is really giving people very practical skills to better self-regulate, to better self-recognize when we're getting out of it, we're wasting emotional energy, and how do we shift it, not suppress it.
I love this.
Yeah, this is awesome. I mean, I'm reading a book right now. I haven't actually started it yet, but I downloaded it on Audible. And
He's got a friend that's read the book.
It's all I've got a friend that's read this book. No, it's on longevity though, and I think one of the things that is going to be yet to be discovered is that this kind of stuff on heart variability, on health, on coherence. Is going to be one of the largest factors of life length, period, for folks who, as we start to train these things and as we start to get better control of this, those folks are going to start living forever, in comparison. I mean, obviously not literally forever, but,
figuratively, but also literally.
Yeah, into their hundreds. And I think that it's certainly going to have an effect on overall well-being, overall health, and quality of being later into life. Because the question is, sure, we can lay in a hospital bed and pump ourselves full of chemistry and keep the heart pumping,
quality of life.
Yeah, and still have absolutely no life because you can't get on a boat and go do whatever. But I think that we're going to have a quality of life that extends when we start taking this stuff into consideration and start training for it, just like we go to the gym and train our bodies to be more healthy. We start training our heart to be more healthy. What do you think, Doc?
Well, okay, I'll tell you another story. About 2 years ago, I was involved in helping writing the criteria for a prize in aging research, actually. When you were to come under the hood of the aging research, there's very little known. It's almost all about selling crap to people. But the real scientific research is pretty woefully inadequate. So a group actually here in Palo Alto of investors decided to give a $1 million prize to spur and motivate research into the actual aging process. And the criteria to win the $1 million was literally heart rate based on heart rate variability.
Wow.
So in an older animal or whatever your model was, probably animal, because this is true not just humans, animals all have HRV as well, and it all gets less with age. That you had an older animal with the heart rate variability of the younger. That's what you had to do to win the $1 million. Because the amount of HRV we have is by far the best kind of overall general indicator we have of aging.
Wow.
That really surprises me, actually.
It does?
Yeah, nothing to do with gene therapy or metabolic waste rates. Just heart rate.
Heart rate variability. The amount of heart rate variability, not just heart rate. See, I got to.
Sorry. When I said that, I did intend to mean heart rate variability.
That's mind-blowing stuff. All right, what else you got that blows our mind?
Yeah, I know. Okay, what else?
What
else do we agree with?
I've gotten to the point where I am now speechless in awe of all the cool stuff that you're talking about, and it's like, okay.
We can go down one more track you haven't asked me about if you want.
Yeah, go ahead.
All right, so when you measure you go to get your electrodes put across your chest or your brain, either one, and you measure the electrocardiogram, right?
Right.
We're measuring electricity, aren't we?
Yes.
Why it's called the electrocardiogram, after all.
Sure.
Whenever you have a flow of current, you also create a magnetic field.
Yes.
Agreed.
And before I became a psychophysiologist, I was a communication engineer. I used to work for Motorola, so it's something I know a little bit about.
Oh, so you know antenna theory pretty well.
Yeah, well enough. I mean, I jokingly say I have to look up Ohm's law now.
Listen, we can talk about resistivity all day.
In fact, I think a lot of when we talk about consciousness and energetics, having a really good understanding of electromagnetics and communication theory is quite helpful, actually.
Yes.
Totally agree.
Yeah.
Just in a different dimension that we can't quite directly measure yet. But the principles are basically the same. So anyway, whenever you have a heartbeat, the heart, in this case, not the body, generates a measurable magnetic field, which your electrodes, of course, don't pick up. They measure current flow. And you can measure the cardiac field about 3 feet away from the body with magnetometers. You can measure a brain wave with the same device at the same setting about an inch away before you lose the ability to detect it. Heart, 3 feet, brain, inch. So, I mean, energetically speaking, the heart is clearly the big player. Now, using the same, almost identical techniques that I would use to decode or demodulate the information being carried by a electromagnetic wave from your cell phone or transmitter, two-way radio, whatever, we can apply those to the magnetic field of the heart and clearly see that emotional state information is being carried by that field.
Yeah.
Pulse modulation. We can tell with about 75% accuracy somebody's emotional state just by decoding that information.
Wow. And now, from a technological standpoint, that's, certainly stands to reason and would be common sense. My question then becomes, how much does that flow into another person's physiology and then become a portion of their empathy?
That's the obvious next step, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
I got an answer for that. When I was in high school,
I'll give you mine for who's done the research.
when I was in high school, I wore a shirt that said "Attitudes are contagious. Is yours worth catching?" So, what do you got?
Match that one.
So our slogan these days, we're getting ready to make T-shirts, is what are you feeding the field?
Oh yeah.
I love that.
I love
that. I love that.
That's awesome. I'd buy that shirt.
Can we get some T-shirts?
Wear it proudly. Yeah, you got to send us.
We'll happily wear them. Absolutely. I love that.
We're kind of competing right now to come up with cool designs for that.
Feeding the field negativity is prohibited, like the alligator signs in Florida.
Right. So basically, we know that the body radiates the magnetic field. The heart radiates the magnetic field. We can measure it.
Right.
It's not some theory or some nonsense or some new age idea.
Right.
And we can measure that it's carrying different information. Now, you don't have to have a $50,000 magnetometer to measure the information.
Just a T-shirt.
It mathematically translates back to the HRV, whatever the pattern of the heart rhythm is, directly and mathematically correlates with the information writing on the field.
Right.
So the next step was, okay, do other nervous systems detect and respond in a measurable way to that information?
Right.
What do you think the answer is?
Yes.
Of course they do.
Right? I mean, hey, look, this isn't new. We've intuitively known this forever.
But the data is new.
Yeah, the data
proving it is new.
Yeah, having the ability to measure it and look at it on a chart of a scientific result of a study is new.
That is true. But I mean, if we've intuitively known it, or we wouldn't have sayings in our language that the tension was so thick in the room you could cut it with a knife, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You feel it.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can feel it. But we've been able to measure that now. And on the other hand, multiple experiments now have shown that if we're in a coherent state, that we have a more coherent information writing in our personal field environment, and that has a measurable impact on lifting others into a higher state.
God, why isn't this across like every national news? Like, this is so important. Like, hey, guess what, asshole? Your thoughts actually infect everyone around you.
Yeah.
That's the biggest thing ever.
That has absolutely nothing to do with who gets kicked off The Voice tonight, though.
Right. You're right.
But it's like the most impactful thing ever that we've all kind of known. Like Eastern philosophers are like, yeah, assholes, we fucking have known this for years. You just found the data that makes sense to you.
Right. Yeah.
Which I get. Like, okay, yeah, whatever. But it's like, why isn't this a larger conversation?
Yeah, it should be a larger conversation, I think.
And I appreciate shows like this. It helps get the word out, right?
Yes, exactly why we connected, and I appreciate you.
Yeah, and we do appreciate your time today, and appreciate because you got stuff that you could do, and you don't have to spend this time with us. But we really appreciate you coming on and sharing your science with us, and sharing your knowledge, and to help get the word out to say, hey, look, we can take control of our emotional lives. We can take control of our physiology and help bring it into a more coherent space that is more healthful for us. Not just individually, but collectively as a species.
Right. We can be more self-responsible for what we're feeding the field.
Right.
Yeah,
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate that. Rollin McCraty, thank you very much for the time that you spent with us today. I really appreciate it that you've come on, and we'll make this a part one of many. We'll have you on for future conversations as we start figuring this stuff out.
All right. Then the next time we can go into the global stuff. The global
yes.
stuff.
Oh, that would be amazing.
We can talk for hours on that.
Yeah, that would be amazing. All right. Well, thank you, sir. Have the great rest of your day.
All right.
Thank you.
You too, guys.
And we'll follow up on email. All right. See ya. And that wraps up our episode for the day. If you'd like to learn more, go to heartmath.org to check out HeartMath Science and maybe pick up a couple of their monitors and play with them on your cell phone if you like. We don't get anything for that. We're plugging it just because we kind of believe in it and enjoy the discovery of the science of all the stuff that we thought we knew that there's more to know. Which is why we're trying to bring that stuff to you, because we know that you're a fan of that stuff too. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell icon and share this with somebody else who might have interest in how we've had these awesome discussions with a bunch of folks and the topics that we've discovered together here on the Two Seals and a Walrus podcast. Hope things find you well. Love you. Talk to you soon. Peace. Share this shit.